so I got the vehicle on the lift. I still have my scan tool connected to the vehicle. I'm going to turn the key on. The key is on in the vehicle. I'm going to lift it up. We need to figure out why the second O2 sensor data PID is remaining at 00. So I'm going to bring up our scan data here. Okay, so we're gonna focus on the second O2 sensor that's stuck at 00, which is really odd. Okay, so let's go up. Perfect. All right, so we got the vehicle up in the air. While we're down here, we're gonna do a quick visual inspection. Man, this engine is really dry. So cameraman Kyler, if you can come down here and show everybody how dry this engine is. Nice. No oil leaks around here. That's good. All right, so here is our first O2 sensor. So if you can see up there, this is the first O2 sensor. This is its electrical connector. So the first O2 sensor is working. Actually, it looks like it's just a 4-wire sensor. So we don't have a problem with that. We have a problem with the second O2 sensor, which is back here, the sensor after the cat. So this is the one that's stuck at 00. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get access to the sensor electrical connector. So here's the connector of the sensor. So I'm going to, let me find a way to get the sensor pulled out. I mean, we're not going to pull out the sensor. We're going to lower the sensor connector a little bit so we can do our tests at the sensor electrical connector. Okay. So there's a little tab over here. See if I can get this light to stay. Okay. Okay, so we got the sensor disconnected. But I want to do my testing on the harness side of the vehicle, not on the sensor side. I want to do my testing on the harness side because if the sensor is the problem, if we do the test on the sensor side of the connector, we might have some skewed readings. Okay, so it looks like there is a little 10 millimeter. Okay, I'm just gonna undo this whole bracket. How's the light, Tyler? Is it good? Okay. I'm trying to find a better way to hold the light over here. Okay, so this connector, I can't really unclip it from the bracket, so I'm gonna have to undo this bracket so we can get access to the back of that connector. So I have a 10 millimeter socket here with my quarter inch ratchet. So there is a bolt over here we have to undo so I can remove this bracket. What's this guy? Okay, so my hand is gonna be in the way for a little bit, guys. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to get this bracket. There's a little tab on the back of the connector here that I have to undo so we can detach the connector from the metal bracket. Right there, I can feel it coming there. All right, so here is the connector on the vehicle side. Okay, so now we need to get to the back of this connector and back probe the wires. Kyler, if you can show this connector here. So here's what I'm gonna do. As you can see, the back of the connector is taped. We cannot see the wires. So I'm gonna undo the tape. We're gonna access the wires. As you can see, it's a 4-wire connector. I'm gonna access the wires on the back of the electrical connector. I'm gonna back probe all the wires. Once I back probe all the wires, I will bring you guys back up so we can see what voltages we have at the wires on our lab scope. So I'm gonna get that set up and then I'll bring you guys back up. So here is what I did off camera. So this is the electrical connector of the second O2 sensor. So this is the connector on the harness side of the vehicle. As you can see, we back probed all the 4 wires on the connector. We have a brown wire, a blue wire, a black wire, and a pink wire on this connector. So we are back probing all of them. So right now, this connector is not connected to the sensor. The key is on in the vehicle. So now I'm gonna get my lab scope set up so we can see what voltages we have at these wires. So now, let me bring up my lab scope here. Okay, so let's go. I'm gonna show you guys the wiring diagram first. I already looked at this off camera. So over here, this over here is the sensor. So O2 sensor, bank 1, sensor 2. As you can see, we have a black wire. I'm gonna highlight these wires. Black wire, brown wire, pink wire, and blue wire. So these are the wires that are back probed. Okay. So now, since we're connected on the harness side, we're not connected at the sensor. So as you can see, so for example, this wire here, the blue wire is coming from the engine computer. So over here is the computer. This is the computer here. Okay, hold on. So this over here, this bar on the side is the engine computer. As you can see, it says engine control module. So this blue wire comes from the computer. So this is probably the signal wire of the sensor. So since we have that connector on the vehicle disconnected, we are back probing the blue wire with the key on right now. If we have voltage on that wire, that will mean that voltage is coming from the engine computer. And that will also indicate a circuit integrity or wiring integrity of this wire, okay? Because if we have voltage at all these wires while this connector is unplugged, that will tell us that the wiring is good, okay? So now, let's go to our scan tool. Okay, so let's go to scan data. So right now, with the key on, we have 00 on the second O2 sensor. So as you can see, we're reading 00 here. So now, I would like to bring up our lab scope. So let's go to, actually, I'm gonna do it through the guided component test so we can look at both sides. So we can look at scan data and the scan tool and the lab scope at the same time. So let's back out. And then let's just grab the ECT. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna turn on all of these. Okay, this is odd. Hold on. Let's back out. I want to turn on all the channels. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Let's go to the scope first, because I want to see what voltages we have on all those wires. So we're gonna turn on all our channels. I'm gonna increase my voltage here. Let's increase our voltage scale. Okay, so the key is on in the vehicle. Check this out. So right now, key on in the vehicle. On the lab scope screen, we have 0.3, so 0.34 volt on the yellow trace. We have 11.59 volt on the green trace, and then 10.97 volt on the blue trace, and then 0.31 volt on the red trace. So the fact that we have voltage on all these wires, this tells me that the wiring is good. We don't have a broken wire. Okay, we have power. I believe the green trace that has 11.59 volt, that's battery voltage, that's supply voltage for the sensor here. Okay, so that's good. So this tells me that the wiring is good. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put my lab scope here. I'm gonna connect the sensor to the harness. Okay, so we have voltage at all these wires, which tells me the wiring is good. So now I am going to now connect the sensor. Actually, hold on. Let me undo all these test leads. I'm gonna have to bring them in from this side. I'm sorry, my hands might be in the way. I apologize. So let's back probe these guys again. Okay. Now, with all these tests that we're doing, I don't know how long this video is going to be. We might have to break it down into 1 or 2 parts. Right, cameraman Kyler? Because this is going to be a long one. I mean, with all these tests we're doing. So let's back probe all these wires. Okay. And then all right. I'm sorry, my hand is in the way. So as you can see, we're still back probing these wires. Okay, we have the same voltages on the lab scope screen. So now I'm gonna connect the sensor. Perfect. So we're connected. We're good to go. So now I am going to lower the vehicle. Actually, as I connect this, okay, we still have voltage here. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to lower the vehicle, and then we're going to start the engine to see what voltages we have at the sensor wiring while the engine is running. So I'm going to lower the vehicle, and then I'll bring you guys back up. We have gotten the vehicle down. So now I am going to, let's start the engine. So as you can hear, the engine is running. I'm looking at our lab scope right now. So we have system voltage on the blue trace and red trace. Okay. Okay, so the engine is running, as you can hear. Okay, so let me turn off the first two channels. Let me drop this down. Okay, we don't have a wiring issue here. It looks like this sensor's not working. Let's go to guided component test. Very odd. So I'm gonna bring up the lab scope and scan data on one screen so you guys can see. So look at our O2 sensor, it's still stuck at 0, 0. Okay, so I'm focusing on the first two traces here. Now let's start the engine. Let's watch our scan data and our lab scope. All right, so this is not right, guys. This O2 sensor is bad. It shouldn't be stuck at 0, 0. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do, guys. The wiring of the O2 sensor is good. We can clearly see it here on the lab scope. We don't have a wiring issue. So this sensor is bad. Now, the customer told me to go ahead and fix whatever I was gonna find. I'm gonna go ahead and replace this sensor, okay? The sensor being stuck at 0, 0, this is clearly not good. Actually, there's one more thing I wanna do. One more thing before we completely condemn the sensor. So right now, the data, I'm looking at the data from the OE side of the scan tool. We might be dealing with substituted values here. I'm gonna go on the generic side of the scan tool, and then we're gonna look at the O2 sensor data PID also to see if it's gonna remain at 0, 0. If it does, then we're replacing this sensor. So let's do this. Let's exit out of this. Okay, let's go to OBD Direct, because substituted value can burn you sometimes. So let's look at our O2 sensor data PID from the generic side to see what we got. Let's look at the code. We might have some O2 sensor codes because, okay, we still have, I was gonna say we might have some O2 sensor codes because we were doing our test with the O2 sensor electrical connector disconnected, but we only have a lean code here. So let's go to data display, because it's odd that the second O2 sensor is stuck at 0, 0. That's no bueno. Let's deselect this. Let's grab our engine speed, fuel system, O2 sensor, bank 1 sensor 2, bank 1 sensor 1, short-term fuel trim numbers. Okay. This should be pretty much everything that I want to look at. And then we're gonna graph our second O2 sensor data pid right here. O2 sensor bank 1, sensor 2. So same thing here, we are at 0, 0. Let me graph the first one. First O2 sensor is showing us a value of 3.2 volt, but the second one is stuck at 0, 0. Okay, so if we bring our lab scope, okay, so as you can see on the lab scope screen, we still have our voltages. So we're still making connection. Everything looks good. Let's go back. Okay, I'm gonna leave the scan tool up here. Okay, so now we're looking at the same data, but this time on the generic side. Okay, so over here, we're not gonna have to worry about substituted values. So let's get this engine to start. So as you can hear, the engine is running. I'm looking at the scan tool right now. The first O2 sensor, there's activity on the first O2 sensor, but there's nothing on the second O2 sensor. Okay, so we have the same value, the same 0, 0 that we had. Let me see if I can reach this. We have the same value that we had on the OE side of the scan tool. We have the same value here on the generic side. As you can see, we are in closed loop. Okay. Our short-term fuel trim bank 1 is 20%, and then long-term is 14%. Yeah, this is a problem. We have high positive numbers. Right now, total trim is about 34%. So plus 34% on total trim, but our second O2 sensor is stuck at 0, 0. So the wiring of the sensor is good. We should have activity on the sensor. Okay, bad O2 sensor. Let me turn off the engine. Guys, this car came from 3 shops. The owner told me that the vehicle was at the dealership, I think the Toyota dealer. It was at 2 independent shops, and it's, you know, the vehicle is still not fixed. As you guys will see this when Kyler put this on the screen. So, you know, we have to replace the sensor. The fact that the second O2 sensor is stuck at 0, 0, that's a problem, okay? The customer already gave us the go-ahead to replace whatever we have to replace to fix this. I'm gonna get a new sensor from our parts store. I will ask for a Denso O2 sensor. I will get a new O2 sensor. Once the sensor comes in, we're gonna install it, and then we will see what happens. The wiring of the sensor is good. We should have activity on the second O2 sensor graph. So I will get a new sensor, and then I'll bring you guys back up. A couple minutes later, we got a brand new O2 sensor from the parts store. Here is the part number for it. We got a Denso O2 sensor. Actually, I was looking at the pressure gauge. Our pressure gauge is still connected to the system. You know, our fuel pressure is at 40 psi. So this is the O2 sensor that we are going to install. Okay, so here it is. It is a Denso oxygen sensor. Denso O2 sensors tend to work very well on Toyota vehicles. So now let's lift up the vehicle so we can replace this O2 sensor. So now we're gonna change the sensor. I'm gonna unplug the electrical connector of the sensor. Okay, and then we're gonna work the wire of the sensor out. Okay, I hope cameraman Kyler can see this. Right there. Okay, sorry, I might be in the way. Okay, so we're gonna get that removed. And then we're gonna get our O2 sensor socket here. There, nice. That wasn't too tight. That's good, because these O2 sensors can get stuck on sometimes, and then they can be difficult to remove. Oops. All right, sorry. All right, so let's remove the sensor. All right, here's the old sensor. Okay, now I'm going to there. Okay, so here's our bad sensor. So we're gonna get this out of the way, and then we're gonna bring in our brand new one. Let's get the brand new one out of the box. Bag. Okay. Connector looks the same. What do you think, Kyler? Does it look the same? Perfect. All right. Okay, I'm gonna apply a little bit of anti-seize here on the threads of the sensor, just a little bit. And then we're gonna install it right there. All right, perfect. We're gonna tighten the sensor. Okay, we're not gonna go gorilla on it. Just tighten up. All right, that's good. Right there. Okay, so I'm going to remove this little clip over here. There. And then we're gonna install this one. There, nice. And then this one's gonna go right there. And then we're gonna reconnect. We're gonna connect our new sensor to the electrical connector. Now, we already did check the wiring. I mean, we don't have to. I mean, I want to disconnect my scope test leads, but I'm still tempted to see what voltages we're gonna have with the new sensor. So we got the new sensor installed. So now let's lower the vehicle so we can start the engine and see if our second O2 sensor is now gonna start updating, if the graph of the second O2 sensor is now gonna start updating. And also, let's see if our fuel trim numbers will get better.